Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Glasp Talk. Today we are excited to have Des Brown with us. So Des is a dynamic force in the digital marketing world, currently serving as a commercial lead at Prevo Digital, one of Africa's premier digital performance agencies. He specializes in strategic growth, partner engagement, and client success across both local and international markets. He's also the founder of Email Expert Africa, so a vibrant community and resource hub empowering creators, solopreneurs, and businesses to become expert email marketers. And with over 13 years of hands-on experience in marketing, operations, and digital strategy, this blends deep technical knowledge with a passion for helping brands grow through smart, measurable digital strategies. And today we will dive into his journey, his insights on email and digital marketing, and his vision for empowering marketers across the continent. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction, Kazuki. Glad to be here with you and Kay, and I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, I enjoyed watching your TEDx talk and about Snowflake, and that's awesome. But could you tell us, what got you excited about digital marketing and email strategy, and why did you choose this area in your life and in your career?
So I actually think it chose me. It wasn't a conscious choice by any means. I think accidentally stumbled into the digital marketing space. I started if I remember correctly, it's around 2012, officially working for an organization that was a digital classifieds organization. So my job initially started as a telesales person selling advertising space in a digital publication to businesses, and sort of found my feet over the first year or two, and got really involved in understanding what it is that we offer and why it's growing like it was. I mean, this is 2012, 2013, and things were just really starting to take off. Um, and with that, it kind of captivated me to uh, sort of take it and run with it. So after leaving that position, I joined a company called Touchbase Pro, which is a South African email marketing platform. And that's where my real sort of journey into email specifically took its foothold. A couple of years after joining the organization and applying my skills there, I decided to take those skills and work on building a community around the email space, which is where Email Expert Africa started. So I've spent the last approximately 3 years now building that community, building up the newsletter itself, and building connections within the email space to sort of further the growth of email, because it's not a if you compare to a lot of the sort of Western world, email is massive in the US. It's massive across much of the northern hemisphere, but there are very few email professionals in Africa. So I've tried to establish myself as somewhat of a voice for the email community here in Africa and in South Africa. But at the same time, it's created a ton of global connection and opportunity. I mean, I'm speaking to you guys, which, if I'm not mistaken, you're based in Japan. Um, a fantastic opportunity to speak to someone outside of just South Africa. So it's been quite a journey, and moving now to Prevo Digital recently, I'm expanding that journey. So taking a lot more of a sort of targeted approach in my learning and applying my skill set in a different arena, being an agency that's a Google partner, an agency that's an Amazon partner, and an agency that's really involved in performance oriented digital marketing is just going to plug the gaps in that skill set as I grow. So it's both the journey of learning and experience gaining, but also a journey to not stay stagnant and not sort of rely on just the email space to carry me through. There's so much outside of that. And as I learn, that's kind of where I'm growing into. So a very exciting journey. It seems like it's just gone by so quickly, but it has been, sheesh, 13 to 15 years that I've been technically in digital, which is it's a while. So yeah, that's kind of where I started.
Yeah, awesome and so exciting. And as you know, like email is kind of really like old technology exists. I think exists over a couple decades, I think already, and you have 10 to 15 years experience, and that's really impressive. And email marketing is super big in the US and in Japan and many countries nowadays. Still, still we have social media and TikTok, but still email marketing is big. But from your experience working with your clients and customers, what's the biggest mistake you see people making like with email marketing today? Still today.
There are actually so many. There are so many mistakes that I think many email senders, I guess they neglect email because it has been around for so long. It's not, as you say, it's not bright and flashy as social media is, especially the short video content and TikTok and the things that give you that instant dopamine hit. Email's been quite an interesting one, and the reason I think for its longevity is the fact that it's kind of a glue that binds internet-based communication together. If you're going to open up a TikTok account, how do I verify that you're the correct person opening that account, that you're a real human? I'm going to send you an email. I'm probably going to send you anything transactional that you do on the internet, an email about that too. So it transcends just merely a peer-to-peer communication channel. It helps as this sort of binding agent across the internet between so many different channels. So I think because of that, and because it's so commonplace, it often gets neglected, and the basics get neglected quite commonly from many email senders, in the sense that they're not following good email practices. Now, good email practice is not just writing an email that sounds good or looks good. It's about making sure, first and foremost, that your audience is put first. And I think the biggest mistake that people make in the email space, it's not putting your audience in the front and center of your email strategy. I think that's the biggest one. When people or businesses especially send emails, they're very often sending about them and not about the audience. I have something to sell. I'm amazing. I can do all these things. Not, I have something for you. I can do something for you. I have something amazing that's going to benefit you. And I think that's commonly where we misplace our focus as email senders. It's not putting the focus on the person that we're trying to build that email for. It's that we're focusing on what's in it for me, when it should be the other way around. So I always, when I sit with clients, when I advise them, I generally have them follow what I refer to loosely in what's called the rule of one. Now, the rule of one is when you're creating an email strategy or when you're putting an email together, the intention behind that should be to send a single communication that achieves a single goal, and that it's designed in a way that it should be appealing to a single member of that audience. The general spray and pray approach, the general unpersonalized approach to email is going to lose you subscribers, because you're not sitting and focusing on, am I sending this in accordance with the person that's reading it? And is that person feeling like that email's been designed for them, or just the general population? And I think that's what differentiates average email senders from phenomenal email senders, the ability to focus on that audience as an audience of one.
That's a really insightful advice and any tips. And do you know anyone? Do you have any example like people or company or brands doing that well?
There are a few. I think if I had to think of one in an immediate sense, Duolingo comes to mind. I'm busy learning. I've got a trip planned to Greece later this year, so I'm busy trying to study Greek. Very difficult, but I guess it's far easier for an English speaker to learn Greek than it is to learn Japanese. So I think Duolingo is a great example. They send email communication that's not just related to you as an individual, but where you are in that customer lifecycle. They're very good at timing their communication based on your interactions with their app. So if you haven't practiced, I know for a fact that if I've forgotten to do my daily Duolingo practice, there's probably going to be an email saying, "Hey, Des and Duo, the little bird is going to be staying there. It's time now to practice." When they're looking to appeal to bring you back in, they appeal very well to emotion, to the person that they're speaking to, and it's that personalized approach that they use in a phenomenal manner to actually achieve that retention that they're looking to achieve, that engagement they're looking to build with their audience. And I think it comes through in things that happen with their brand. I don't know if you recall, but it's probably a month ago, or 2 months ago, the year has just flown, but probably a month ago, they killed Duo. They just, sorry, our mascot is dead. And the entire world erupted, going, "Where is this mascot?" I mean, it's a mascot from a language learning app. It's not, like they've lost a president or something like that. But the world was up in arms, and the reason for that is we formed this connection to the silly mascot, this bird, through the communication that we're receiving from Duolingo. So I think that's a great example. I can possibly think of a few others that do it really well, but that's probably one of the more notable brands that uses that strategy super effectively to really build that personal engagement with their audience.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and Duolingo does great marketing. So yeah, not only about email, but also app notification, also UX
Yeah.
gamification. Yeah, pretty amazing. But like if a company or founders reach out to you as a client, so yeah, I want to do email marketing. So what do you start with?
So generally, it's understanding two environments. The first is your technical environment. So is email currently part of your environment, and what does that look like? Because when we get to the email sort of sending in world and space, it's great to be able to have a phenomenal email strategy and tick all the right boxes in your strategy, but it means nothing if you aren't first and foremost getting to the inbox. So there are a couple of prerequisites that I generally begin with. There are requirements that Gmail has, there are requirements that Outlook has, that Apple Mail has, that Yahoo has. All of these receivers of email and those inboxes are going, you need to tick the right technical boxes before we'll allow an email into our email infrastructure. So generally what I begin with is the deliverability journey. Are you set up correctly? What does that technical environment look like? Can this email that you're sending reach the inbox in the right way? And can we keep it in the inbox? And that's where the second stage of that comes in, which I'll address shortly. But from a technical perspective as well, it's also analyzing, do you have the right tools? So there are some phenomenal email tools out there. There are some phenomenal tools around certain features, putting together beautiful campaigns, putting together the right type of automated emails. But is that fit for purpose? Does that match what your brand needs or your business needs in order to execute the best email communication possible? Now, I'm very cautious about mentioning names because I don't want to seem like I'm being paid by any email platforms to speak about them. But if you think about it this way, from a technical setup perspective, if you're using a platform that is designed for creators to send e-commerce based email communication, you're going to struggle because the feature set is not built for essentially creator communication, and it can be repurposed and used for that, but it's generally set up far more in an e-commerce sense or vice versa, right? So the idea is to go, okay, secondly, is the email infrastructure that you're setting up the correct infrastructure for the types of emails you're looking to send and the journey that you're looking to build? And if those two boxes are ticked, we then move on to the content side. Now, on the content side, it varies because different email senders are at different stages of their email journey. Some of them may be starting out, and the strategy for someone starting out in email is very different to an established email sender. They're going to have different needs, different problems, different goals. And that's where defining that strategy per person that you're working with becomes really important. If someone is starting out, there's going to be a very big focus on things like audience growth. I need an audience to speak to be able to grow my email program. So the focus very often shifts to how can I grow my audience and how can I ensure that the audience that are signing up for my emails are sticking? That becomes a big focus. If someone is in that sort of mid phase, they've grown somewhat of an audience, they're looking to scale their email further, what becomes important to them is looking at the future plan, right? Where do I want to take this based on the infrastructure and my learning about what I've already accumulated and what needs to be improved so that I can scale this and grow? And very often it's a email operator that has a audience. That audience is sitting there untapped from a monetization perspective or from a potential perspective. It's generally how can I monetize this audience to be able to improve my revenue, my bottom line, and all of the things that I'm writing these emails for. And then you look at established email senders and those that already have a monetization program in place. The tricky part about those guys is trying to find incremental improvement. So they're already monetizing, they have a baseline. what does incrementality look like from an improvement perspective, right? Where can I attribute future growth to the changes in my email strategy? And that's where things like cross collaboration and further audience insights becomes quite important. That's where things like expansion of your email product and your email business becomes important. There are so many different factors for these different stages of an email-based business, or even any business that's using email to monetize. You just need to be able to, and this is the cautious part as an advisor and as someone consulting to ensure that email senders do this well, you need to be cautious about appealing to the person you're working with at the right stage of that email journey. If you get that wrong, and if there are any email consultants listening to this, if you get that wrong, you're going to be putting the focus for your customer on the wrong thing. If you put it on the wrong thing, you're not going to achieve the results that you require. They're going to move on to the next person that's going to be able to help them do that. So that would kind of be my approach and where I generally begin in those sort of two facets, technical and strategy. And once you tie those two together, it's ongoing iteration. How do I tweak this? How do I look at my statistics and how do I improve this over time? Because you can't improve something if you don't measure it correctly. And that's very often a big part of where you go next. So I hope that answers your question well.
100%, more than 100%. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you mentioned like initially you look into delivery rate or delivery rate. So what is a good delivery rate from your perspective? Or also, if the delivery rate is not good or like email is sent to only junk box or reported as spam, what would you do?
So let's break that up. I'm going to speak about delivery, and then I'm going
Yes.
to speak about deliverability because they're very often intertwined, but they're not the same thing. So there are two stages to your email journey. The first stage is getting from the system you're sending that email to the inbox. The next stage is where in the inbox that's going to place. So delivery is the process of getting that email from the system you're sending it to that person's inbox. And generally, that's where there needs to be some technical authentication. I don't want to get too technical, but there are basic terms for certain technicalities in the setup of your email process that need to be adhered to. There are things like you'll hear the term DKIM, DKIM, or SPF. You need to have these records added to your domain. But there's also a newly introduced one that's happened over the last 2 years that's become a prerequisite, and that's a DMARC record. So what this does, and to break it down into simple terms, when you send an email from a system, that system is speaking to another system to say, I'm a legitimate email sender. Because essentially that system is impersonating you as an email sender and your domain or your website's domain to deliver that email. So that is why you need that DMARC record, is to go, this is a legitimate email sender. Their domain has approved the fact that that email can leave this environment using that domain and into your environment in a safe manner. So generally, that's where delivery comes in. And the idea there is to ensure that your email doesn't bounce. So generally, an acceptable standard in the industry, 98+% of your emails should be reaching the inbox as a good delivery rate. Anything less than that, you could potentially have issues. The problem with this, and before I chat about deliverability, the problem with this is that very often that is not correctly reported. So email systems and most of the big reputable email systems report on this correctly, but a lot of them don't. They don't tell you what percentage of emails left the system and entered the inbox. And that is where you need to take the proactive measure to go and have a look, assess if your emails have bounced and look at the reasons why they've bounced. Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Is it related to my behavior? Is it related to my technical setup? There could be a whole bunch of variables in that sense. But if you're getting anything less than 98% and above, there should be a problem in the works, and you need to be looking into that. So that is delivery and getting your email to the inbox. The second part is deliverability, and here's where it gets really difficult. It doesn't have to be, but it can be tricky. Because if your email reaches the recipient's inbox, but it's not getting into their inbox, it's getting into their spam folder, you again have a problem. Now, what causes that is very often, and 99% of the time, not necessarily a technical problem, it's a behavior problem. Now, what I mean by behavior is that emails have evolved over time. I'm sure you've heard 10 years ago, an email may not reach the inbox, it might get pushed into junk if it's got certain words in the subject line, or it's got certain phrases or things like that. Emails evolved completely since that space to be based far more on engagement than it is based on specifics within the email. Now, what I mean by this, and maybe to clarify a little bit further, if you send an email, the point is to get that email opened and to get that email clicked. That's why you're sending it, right? Now, if those actions don't happen, those are considered in the email world negative signals. So a negative signal is an audience telling an email inbox like a Gmail or an Outlook or a Yahoo or an Apple Mail that I'm not really interested in this person's email. So what happens over time is if you stop engaging, if you stop opening, if you stop clicking, those emails all of a sudden start winding up in the spam or the junk folder. So a lack of engagement is first and foremost probably one of the things that's going to impact you not getting to the inbox and going into the spam folder. And the reason I say that's behavior related is because you need to think of, why did this person sign up and why aren't they engaging? And did I follow the correct steps from a strategy perspective to ensure that they continue to engage? So practices like buying an audience list, practices like signing someone up without them actively subscribing, things that cause bad relationships are generally negative signal indicators because people are going to disengage, they're going to report you as spam. All of those things are going to wind you up in that spam folder. It's not necessarily something technical. So when assessing that, you got to look at your strategy. Am I appealing to the audience that I'm speaking to? Have I signed them legitimately? Am I offering continuous value? And I think that's the biggest part. You can offer initial value, a lead magnet or something like that to get someone to sign up, but it doesn't stop there. The journey continues over and over again. You need to continue adding that value. Otherwise, eventually, if enough folks don't open or engage with the emails, you wind up in the spam folder. So that's the breakdown around how delivery versus deliverability works. I hope that paints a picture for the audience.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is so helpful. And so then let's say you send, someone, people subscribe to your newsletter or email campaigns, and then you send the email, but some people never open your emails and never engage with your emails. And then in that case, should we stop sending them or should we remove them from the email list? Or how should we deal with that, like a negative how to say, effective.
It's a very good question. Very good question, because again, and one I actually get asked quite often. And generally, the answer is that there are automated ways to do this. Now, most email systems allow you the opportunity to send automated emails or customer lifecycle emails. So think about it this way: you sign up to a newsletter, you get a welcome email, or you get a series of emails over the stages of that welcome journey. The same should be happening when someone disengages. So I call these, and most of the email world call these re-engagement campaigns or re-engagement strategies, where if a subscriber meets certain criteria, you should have an automated journey to try and win them back. And if that automated journey fails, you should have something in place that should unsubscribe that person. So the way that I approach it in my email is, if someone is disengaged, now if I look at my newsletter, I'm sending 3, maybe 4 communications depending on the month. If someone within 90 days has not opened or clicked an email, I've got an automatic email that fires off to say, hey, are you ghosting me? And it's got a little ghost in the subject line. My idea is to catch attention, right? Because at this stage, they're not engaging. They're not necessarily part of my email sort of journey and community as involved as the rest are. I've kind of got less to lose if that person does unsubscribe. So in that email, I'm asking a broad question. Are you still here? Are you okay? Is it us? Is it you? Would you like us to unsubscribe you? And I put a button there. So you're welcome to unsubscribe here. What I don't want is someone sticking around and not engaging because they're going to impact my deliverability later down the line. So it's not about having a big audience, it's about having an engaged audience. And that is why I actively encourage that unsubscribe. And that carries on for a period from 90 to 120 days. I've got 2 more emails in that journey. At the 120-day mark, I mean, that's 4 months if you work it out. at that 120-day mark, I have a segment that gets created that the person falls into. And once a week, I'm going to go and I'm going to unsubscribe before I send my next newsletter. So I've got an exclusion criteria. And at the end of each month, I'll go and remove those folks because I'm paying for them, but they're not engaging with my emails. So I'm kind of wasting money. So you can automate this with most good email systems. It becomes an easy process. If you need to do it manually, the best way to do this is to segment based on someone's engagement level over time. But there should be plans in place to be able to remove those people, because at the end of the day, the fewer people that engage, the more likely you are to wind up in the spam folder.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. But why did you choose like 90 days, not 30 days, 45 days? Is that the reason? There's a reason here, or just you chose 90 days as a buffer?
So for me, it's the way I engage with email. And it sounds crazy, but if I'm traveling, especially during a period like, most of the Western world celebrates Christmas and New Year and all of that and in the Southern Hemisphere, that's our holiday period. We don't go on holiday during the sort of mid-year period like USA does. We do things at the end of the year. So it's midsummer here, it's Christmas, it's New Year's. There's a lot of people taking their annual leave, and that period could last 3 to 4 weeks. Now, before that, I've had a ton of emails about Black Friday, Halloween, Christmas. There's a lot happening in my inbox. And if you calculate those 2 periods alone, there's a period of approximately 60 to 75 days where your engagement is definitely going to taper off. I see it in email all the time. Your engagement tends to taper off. People could be traveling and there could be outliers. So I'm giving an extra, if I think about it, an extra 15 days, an extra 2 weeks after that variable period to account for a lack of activity. The reason for that is based on that frequency of 3 emails a month. If someone hasn't opened an email because they're traveling for, let's say, 2 months, something happens thereafter, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. If I'm someone that's a daily sender, I'm going to shorten that period quite dramatically. So it's based on a percentage of email sent over time and what that percentage would look like. If I was sending an email, let's say every day for 5 days, that period is going to be 30 days, no engagement. I'm immediately starting that journey because that percentage of email over that time is just so much more. So that's the kind of sweet spot I've found with a lot of experimentation and over the last 3 years that I've been sending for email advice in your inbox. But at the end of the day, it seems to work, and I haven't had any deliverability issues whatsoever. And I've kept an average of around 50% on my open rates. My click rates have improved. Actually, that's been quite good. My click rates are sitting at around 18% per email sent. So I think from an engagement perspective, it helps. But again, I kind of counter it off as I go. And that's what my strategy is based on. So yeah, that should give you an insight into the way I approach it.
But 50% open rate and 18% rate, the click rate is super high, I think, in the industry. And what's the secret ingredient then you do it? Or because it might, how to say, like I'm understanding, if the person opens your email or not depends on the title, I think. Title and the small description. Is that correct? And how can we leverage the numbers? And I'm just curious. Yeah, how do you do that?
So I lied a little. It's 47.7% for the last 6 months. I checked the stats earlier today in case I get asked this question. And the click rate is kind of more of what I'm chasing, right? Because it's very difficult to distinguish, and open rates are not accurate. I want to caveat this. Open rates are somewhat of I wouldn't say a vanity metric, but they're not the North Star of what you should be measuring in email. Open rates can be skewed because of the way that opens generally work in email. Remember, I cannot tell, let's say I'm opening an email on my mobile device. I cannot tell what's happened on that device. I've got a pixel that's inserted into the background of that email that tells me that email's been opened. That's how email platforms work. So very often those are skewed because things like if you receive an email in Outlook and your images are turned off, that pixel is image based. So you could still have read the entire email without turning images on, but it's not attributing an open to you. Or vice versa, I could be using an Apple device. Apple's got the Apple Mail privacy policy. Now, Apple's mail privacy policy will open that email on your behalf and check it for illicit content before it serves that email to you. So I'm then attributing it open to you when you didn't actually open that email in the first place. You might not ever open it again. So it's a very skewed metric, which is why I put such a big emphasis on clicks. Now, clicks do two things. One, there is a positive signal in the inbox. Someone is taking an action from my email. And the reason that I focus on clicks so much is because the way that I've built my newsletter is based on giving information and giving resources and giving tools I want people to receive from that email. That's my one goal, my rule of one. I want someone to receive and to be able to grow from that reception. Now, in order to get those clicks, I put a big focus on where I place my links. I put a big focus on the way that my email is structured. I put a big focus on splitting up my content so that not only am I serving that goal of helping someone learn, I'm also monitoring what people are clicking so that I can include more or less of that content as I go. So I'm using it to constantly have my audience tell me what they want to hear as opposed to me guessing. Now, going back to your question and going back what gets your email opened, your subject line is definitely important, right? So you've essentially got two subject lines when you receive an email. You've got your main subject line. You've then got your preview text, that little bit of text that's supposed to support your subject line. Now, interestingly, with AI summaries that have come into play, so Gmail's now introduced this. I know Apple Mail has recently introduced this. These AI summaries sort of take the place of your secondary subject line, your preview text. So that has become far less of a strategy. But speaking about subject lines and speaking about what gets your email opened, I get into this debate quite often because I think that a subject line is secondary to the person sending the email. So when I receive an email, I'm not opening it based on a subject line unless it's related to something specific, like a product that's for sale or something that's caught my attention, which you do get clever strategies behind that. But very often, or most of the time, I'm opening the email because of the person or the business that sent that email. It's the reason I signed up in the first place. It's the reason that I continue to consume that content. So if you've got a weak value proposition, if you aren't a good sender that's adding value to the inbox, you can use the best subject line in the world. It's not going to get your email opened at the end of the day. The idea is to go, is this email something of value? What's in it for me? If that is there, it doesn't matter what subject line. You could have just a thumbs up in the subject line. Someone's going to open that email because they see the person sending it is sending something of value. So as much as AI is changing the game and creating some really intricate subject lines and doing some great email summaries, what is going to drive me as an email reader to open your email is if you as the email sender are sending something that is good.
I see. And so you mentioned that in a click rate, so it's pretty high. So I want to know more about what strategy or what did you do to increase the click rate?
So it's been a journey. My click rate started out at approximately 4% when I first started sending my campaigns. And I mean, 4% is not bad, but I had a very small audience at the time. Now my audience has grown substantially since I first started sending these emails, but I've managed to increase my click rate by 400%. And the way that I've done that is from learning from what people are clicking on and adding more value by putting more links in that people enjoy. The people that are signed up, what is it that they enjoy? What are they clicking on? What type of content am I building around what they're engaging with? So every email I send, I run an email analysis on the content. I have a look at a couple of things within that analysis. First and foremost, where in the email is that person clicking? Are they clicking towards the top? Are they clicking towards the middle? Are they clicking towards the bottom? That tells me a lot about how far they're getting in my emails. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm using that to analyze, okay, am I placing my links too low? Am I placing them too high? Am I placing them in the right areas, or am I emphasizing them enough? So if, for example, I'm seeing a big amount of clicks in the same area, but one link is performing better than the other, I know what style of link to use. Am I going to use a button? Am I going to use a piece of linked text? Am I going to use something like a poll in this specific section? Because you can use polls and surveys in email. So I'm using these sort of metrics and the learnings from our audience to go, okay, I'm going to place my clicks here. So I'm constantly changing up the format of my newsletter to try and optimize for that action, for that click. And that's what's generally brought those click rates far higher, is introducing content that people want to see based on what they've previously showed interest in. Where are they taking those actions? Why are they taking those actions? And trying to get into the mind of my reader. Because if I can get into the mind of my reader, I know that I can improve that click rate even further. My goal is to try and get the click rate in every email to 25%. And it sounds crazy, and I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'm sure as hell going to try get to 25%.
Yeah,
That's really
but
impressive.
it's impressive and doable. And you mentioned like, button or, poll or like, link title, yeah, link text. So from your perspective, so which one, works the best? It depends on the
So
content or context, but yeah.
yeah, it depends on what I've put in. So generally when I'm sharing a quick bit of information, or if I'm sharing a long form piece of content, I don't want to send someone away from that content intentionally, right? So it differs to that quick based content. If I'm in long form, I'm going to underline text, but I'm only going to highlight bold links that I really want someone to click. So for example, let me give you a practical example. If I'm referencing a statistic, if someone is really interested to go and see the research behind that statistic, they know there's a link there, but they're generally not going to click it. It's more of a respect thing, an attribution thing, and making sure that I give credit to where I've found that information. Do I want people to necessarily click it? No, but if they do click it, am I learning from that? Yes. Now, let's say, for example, I'd like to really drive a serious action. In a serious action, meaning I've got a product to sell, I've got something I want you to join, I've got let's say it's a webinar, or let's say it's a podcast I'd like you to listen to. I'm going to use a button because I really want you to take that action to go and listen, to watch, to sign up, to buy. Buttons work really well for that. When I'm sharing a list of things that I want you to click, you're going to be picking which of these things makes the most sense for you to click. I'm then going to use underlined, bolded text to be able to make sure that I'm not just sending you away from all the content in an immediate fashion. I'm having you choose amongst that content what you want to click. So the strategy, okay, as you say, it differs. It differs based on the type of content. It differs based on the section within that email that I'm looking to send that person elsewhere from. And then when it gets to things like polls or surveys, I'm very cautious about the way I use these, because unless you've got an interactive email, which is sort of where email is going, and it's not a very supported, how can I put it? It's not a very supported practice yet, because inboxes can't accommodate for interactive email just yet. But because of that fact, and I know I'm sending someone away to possibly take more than one action, I'm very cautious about putting those at the end of content, or at the end of a piece of long form content, as a question, as a thought provoking piece, as a little bit of feedback. Tell me a bit more. So, various strategies for various types of sections within an email, never mind various emails, but various types of sections within those emails define the way that I go and add that link into that email, if that answers that question.
Wow, that's really, really helpful. And yeah, thank you for the great tactics. And at the same time, you mentioned that, usually people like think, oh, how to say, decide to open or not depend on the person or brands, send you the email, right? In that sense, do you think, how to say, like growing your brand outside of an email helps your audience open the content and open the links? I mean, let's say,
Definitely.
you have a great brand. Let's say you send the email, but at the same time, if you have a great brand, nurture on Twitter, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, somewhere else, or TikTok, YouTube, then so that can increase the number of like the open rate and also click rate.
Yes, you're 100% correct. That brand carries power. It carries familiarity, and it carries trust. I think the biggest thing when it comes to taking an action is trust. Humans act on things they trust because they know that it is safe, and they know that it carries value for them. Now, if you are sending emails in isolation and that's your only channel, it can be a little bit dangerous, because where else are people seeing my name? Where are they seeing my brand? Where else have I established a level of trust? So that's why, you can't be all things to all people. and it's very difficult. You'll probably just burn yourself out. But you need to have a presence outside of just email, because email doesn't work in isolation. I mentioned having these sort of interconnected parts around the sort of digital sphere. And that's why I personally, for example, chose LinkedIn as a supporting mechanism to my email. Now, on the LinkedIn side, I've put a big focus on building that trust, because I know that it's going to feed people into the email environment. And if they want to cross-reference and make sure that what I'm sharing in email is accurate, they're probably going to look at LinkedIn. So the two work symbiotically. And it's created, I mean, over the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've amassed approximately 15,000 followers on LinkedIn, just because of that reciprocation of going, okay, cool, you can trust me in my advice here, but I'm supporting that in email and vice versa. And then outside of that, you've also got things like your website. Website's very important, not because of information, but because of trust. If you think of it this way, if you see a website that doesn't look good, you're very often not going to spend your money with them. You're very often not going to trust them as much, because that is an advertisement for your brand. It's not necessarily just a representation of you as a business or as a sender. It's an advertisement for your brand. It's kind of like getting and I don't know if you have a lot of these in Japan, but getting a pamphlet handed to you. If it's not attractive, if it's not appealing, you're going to crumple it up, you're going to chuck it away. It's the same thing with a website. You're going to hit the website, you're going to see it's not that great, so I'm going to move on, and I'll be moving on to your competitor. And that's the advantage of creating this environment of trust. So email shouldn't work in isolation. Some folks believe that it should. I have a differing opinion on that, but it should be interconnected into all that you're doing in the digital space and remain central, because that will help build that trust.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And sorry, I forgot to ask, to improve the click rate, regarding a click rate.
Yes.
But how to say, in my understanding or from my experience, the more we put links in the emails, the chance that goes to spam box is higher. That's my understanding. So in that sense, is there a ratio we should focus on, because let's say every line, if we have a link, and that's really, how to say, annoying, right, to reader. So, and also I'm not sure if Google, Apple email like checking the content, but if there are more links, from my experience, it harder to reach to audience inbox or getting higher engagement. Do you have ideas or thoughts around this?
Yes. So that is one of those aspects where the email universe has evolved. So previously, if you had a lot of links in your emails, the likelihood of you winding up in spam was a lot higher, because they had software that wasn't as effective at checking links before they served it to that audience. Email security and internet security in itself has changed quite a bit, especially over the last 10 years. So the ability for Google and Apple and Outlook to check the content within those emails and allow them into the inbox has become a lot more advanced. So I'm of the belief that having multiple links in your emails is not a bad thing. It's not going to necessarily affect your ability to get to the inbox. But what you need to be cautious with is obviously the psychology behind it and the behavior of your reader. If you're going to send an email that's just a bunch of links, someone's going to scan through that. They're going to have a over stimulation of choice, to put it in a fancy way. They're going to have analysis paralysis. What do I click? And if they can't make that decision, they're going to exit. Now, if they don't take that action, what is that telling your inbox? It's telling that inbox that this is not content that they're necessarily interested in, which means the behavior and the reaction to your email is going to cause it to go to spam. Now, there are certain things. So I've found that in the past, I've sent an email or two that's had a link that has a link shortener that hasn't been verified or validated, cause my email to come up as potentially spam, because it couldn't read what was behind that link, right? And that's because there was a mechanism within that link that said you had to verify that you're a human and a whole bunch of stuff. So that was an outlier event. I've experienced it in the past too with downloading attachments. So if you link directly to an attachment, because they can't read, these systems cannot read what's in that actual document or in the folder that you're attaching. It very often associates that as spam, because if you think of malware, if you think of viruses and Trojan horses and all these sort of phishing links, very often those are sent as documents. They're sent in the form of a Word document, or they're sent in the form of a PDF that's got a link to something that's malware. So they treat that with caution. So I would say try and avoid directly putting links to documents within your emails. But again, the email world has evolved to the point that that is no longer something that's a commonplace issue. It's more of an outlier based on the type of link and a couple of other variables. So I think the biggest caution is the reaction. Don't put too many links that are going to overwhelm your audience, that they're not going to take an action. If you put links in place, have a strategy behind splitting that up. Support your links with the appropriate amount of content, with the appropriate amount of visuals. It's also why I'm not a big fan of all image emails. You don't have that ratio and that ability to see a text and a link and an image. It's just one flat image with a little bit of, if some people don't even put this, alternate text. So it becomes quite difficult to be able to take an action if you aren't seeing those images, or if your phone loads slowly, or if you have a bad internet connection. You've got to, as an email sender, always, and I keep emphasizing this on this call today, but you've got to look at the reaction to your emails as your number one determinant of where your email winds up in that inbox.
Totally makes sense. Thank you.
Awesome. As long as it makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And also, regarding the impact of AI, since now AI is trendy and many people use many AI for many use cases, and email is the one of the use case of the AI.
Yes.
So do you see any impact of AI on email marketing?
I'm already seeing it. It's quite interesting. Email and AI have been friends for a couple of years now. Having worked for an email marketing organization, we started developing AI elements at Touchbase Pro probably around 2020, if I think about it correctly. So about 5 years that AI journey's been going, but it's a little bit different from generative AI. So most email platforms will use generative AI to either support your text or to help you with image sourcing or generation. But that's kind of where it stops. Possibly some layouts and templates. I work with a great brand called Stripo, who offer an AI email builder that does some pretty cool stuff. It has the ability to lay out email campaigns. It has the ability to pre-fill content, but it's not a human voice. It will never know your audience like a human will know your audience. Now, what we were doing at Touchbase Pro was a little bit different. We were using AI to utilize user behavior outside of email to help segment the audience within the email environment a little bit better. So a script was installed. Let's say, for example, it was a news website. A script was installed on the website so that when someone logged in, we were using an AI algorithm to cluster what they were looking at, so that when we send emails, we can automatically feed content that relates to that into that person's email, thus building an email of one. So every person that gets the email from that news publication would have content that is tailored to them based on the authors that they read or the journalists that they followed, based on the type of content. So did they enjoy sport? Did they enjoy politics? Did they enjoy entertainment? And based on those variables, the AI engine would make sense of this individual and feed content from the website via an RSS feed or via an AI feed into that email campaign and tailor that email based on dynamic content fields to serve a better email to that individual. So that's where I see the future of AI going, using those AI components in email to be able to segment better, to be able to tailor content better. I think we're past the point of just generative AI being something that you can slap an email together to save time. That's commonplace and most email systems have it. Where is it going next? And I think hypersegmentation, the focus on that audience and learning about audience behavior, making sense of your statistics, that's where AI is going to become really powerful in email as we sort of grow into the space.
Wow, that's really interesting future. And do you so from your experience, do you see about like the international difference. And have you seen the difference in engagement depending on the country or their background and so on? Or have you noticed, AI, realize, there's a difference in engagement depending on the people where they are from or where they're based in, something like that?
So not necessarily. I think it depends on how you segmented your audience and the types of emails you're sending. I personally appeal to quite a broad array of people, but I'm only sending in one language, which becomes quite limiting if you think of certain regions where English is not a first language or even a recognized official language. Those are not necessarily my target audiences. But at the end of the day, if there's a good amount of engagement and there's a good amount of reading, there's enough technology out there to be easily translating communication, to easily make that communication available widely. It's more about the types of content and how that appeals. Let's say for example, am sending very American or European based content to someone in South America, they may lack a little bit of that cultural nuance. It may lack a little bit of the relevance for those individuals. These are tools and things that potentially aren't available to them in that region. Or these are concepts and principles that aren't relevant to someone in a Spanish or Portuguese speaking country. Or, there's a whole bunch of variables. So I expect generally that there's going to be different levels of engagement based on where you're sending emails. But at the end of the day, I think humans interact very similarly with communication across the board. We are very similar creatures. The internet only works in a specific way, if you think about it as well. So when looking at multinational communication, I always consider a couple of things that are really important. One, language is always number one. If someone is not going to be able to read in English or speak in English, it's going to be very difficult to build a relationship, especially from an entertainment perspective, if you don't get humor right, if you don't get tone right. You could say something that is potentially offensive without meaning to, because it's a norm in your culture. So always that language and that cultural nuance becomes an important factor. The other one is time zone. So I've got a very strategic time that I send my emails, because I'd like to appeal to a European and South African audience that are in very similar time zones. But I'm also got a very big US-based audience where I get a lot of engagement. So I need to time it well so that I'm appealing to both without necessarily sending an email at the wrong time. So if I send my emails, I've got a two-way split. Anything that is from sort of the Saudi Arabia kind of contingent onwards. So from that west, so you've got Saudi Arabia, you've got sort of India kind of forming part of that. You've got Africa and Europe. You've then got the US. When I send a campaign, I send that all at the same time. And that's generally an afternoon in South Africa, which is a morning in the US and an early evening in India/Saudi Arabia. But if you're situated, and I use IP-based location tracking to be able to determine the segments within my audience. So I'm looking at where you're opening it from. It's not a perfect science because people use VPNs and other things like that. But if you're in the sort of regions east of that, so much of Asia, Australia, Oceania, I actually send that email to a different segment based on their time zone. So that email only fires off a day after, technically, in the sort of mid to late morning, but it's because I don't want to be sending an email that's going to wind up in your inbox at midnight and possibly wake you. And you're not going to be very happy with me if I'm waking you with an email about email at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's a little bit of a strategy, and it takes a bit of work to get your segmentation to that point. But once you're there, it makes it worth it because that's how I'm getting those click rates. I'm thinking of my audience. How are they reading this? What are they doing when they read this? What is the intention behind them taking that action? I also don't want you to wake up. Say you're in Japan. I send it, it winds up at 1 a.m. You wake up at 7, 8 a.m. And my email's in the middle of a bunch of news emails, a bunch of promotional emails, because most emails are sent early in the morning, if you think about it. Now, in the morning, you're going to be having your coffee. You're going to be getting your day on the go. You're not going to be looking at my email with the same interest you'd be looking at it possibly later in the day. I've got less of your attention. I've got more competition in the inbox. There are so many little variables that I'm trying to consider, and I'll never account for everything, but so many little variables I'm trying to consider so that I keep those statistics up, because those are the things that set my email apart from someone who's just sending an email and hoping that it winds up with the right recipient.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
very
that's
interesting.
interesting. Of course, it depends on the context or content you send from the email, but usually morning is better or lunchtime is better to send, or like after work. So of course, it depends on the content you send.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I advise
Yeah.
clients, it's a very similar conversation. You know, I get asked this question all the time: when's the best time to send an email? You get some general statistics. Most people will say a Thursday morning, Tuesday morning. Last year it was a Wednesday morning. Um, it depends. It, as with most things in email, it heavily depends. And the way that I've gone about monitoring this is looking at my audience. I've noticed that I get most of my clicks in the mid-afternoon. In the European and African region, I get most of my clicks in the US in the morning from a few tests that I've run because I've sent time zone based sending before, and I've like I say, for most of the world, I've removed that. But I tend to get higher engagement from the US in the morning because they tend to start their day a little bit later than people in Africa. I mean, we're at work 7:30 in the morning, and our day's already on the go. But we're finishing off a little bit earlier in the evenings. Season dependent, of course. I've noticed the same in Europe, whereas in the US, they're starting their day between 9 and 10. They're going through their emails, they're getting a little bit more engagement going there. In the afternoons, I'm getting very little engagement. So it's been a bit of experimentation and a bit of learning, but no two audiences are going to be the same. You also need to think of what you're sending. If you're a news sender, the best time to send is early in the morning. Why? Because by 10 a.m., it's old news. If you're a stock trader, when did the stocks come online? When is my audience most likely going to trade? Very different to someone who's trying to sell a someone who's trying to sell a movie ticket. I've seen this in the past with a company that we worked with that was a cinema. Their best time to send was 8 p.m. on a Thursday evening because that's the time that their ticket sales were peaking. So people were buying tickets for the weekend ahead, getting their tickets for the movies on a Friday. They would buy that in the Thursday evening in preparation for their weekend. So it all depends on your audience. It all depends on the way that they're interacting. It takes a little bit of work to get to that point, but it's worth doing it because your engagement is going to improve with that.
Wow.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah, switching the topic a little bit, and I was curious about like sponsorship. Nowadays some people, some newsletter monetize their content through like a sponsorship. So
Yes.
having this email is brought by XYZ company or product, and they just want to show it. So, do you have some thoughts and about the sponsorship and what is the best way to get or look for sponsorship, and when is the time the newsletter or the company start looking for sponsorship and so on?
So it's an interesting one because I started a little bit late in my journey. You know, I only over the last year have started monetizing through sponsorship. Before that, it was affiliations, and before that, it was dedicated emails for brands. But from a sponsor perspective, I think getting a sponsor as early on in your email journey as possible is going to be relevant because you can grow with that sponsor. Finding and I'm going to go back to that word relevance. Finding relevant sponsors is really critical. If you're sending a publication with a sponsor that's misaligned with your audience, you're not going to get the clicks you want or the engagement you want, which means you're not going to earn the right type of money from those sponsorships. So there are platforms that make it quite easy. I know I use Beehive to send my emails. I know Beehive's got the built-in ad network, and generally you get approached as an email sender to be part of the ad network, and you can pick from different ads that get served to you to say, okay, I'd like to partner with this brand or that brand. Now, when it comes to my audience, I want to serve them things that I've promised them. I haven't promised them any information about cryptocurrency. So I'm not necessarily going to go and choose a sponsor that is offering a crypto-based product. Why? My audience isn't necessarily interested in that. They're there for marketing insights. They're there for insights about email, about growing in the digital space. So anything that appeals to digital is going to far likely be a better sponsor for me because my audience is going to engage. So when and I generally give this advice to email creators and senders. when you're looking at sponsors, you need to look at what is relevant for your audience. Because the goal at the end of the day is to create as much engagement for that sponsor as possible. You're going to get paid the most money, depending on what you're sending, as possible based on that relevance. So look for things that align with what your audience needs are. Look at what they're engaging with. You can test out things that are outliers. If you want to send, let's say, for example, something for a news publication to see how it works, make sure it's aligned with your audience, but look at those engagement rates. Look at if people are clicking. Look at people are opening. Look at the placement of that advert. Is it just an advert for that organization, or does your email carry value and put that in contextually well? Right? You can't just go and slap an advert there and say this is sponsored by X, and then your content lacks value. It's not going to create engagement. So make sure it's relevant, make sure it fits in well, make sure it suits the design. It can't just be an advert for the organization. People are there to read your email. They're not there to read ads. It needs to be done tastefully, is the right way to put that. So I think you can start early. I think you should start early in your email journey. You don't need a big audience to earn from email. You just need to be smart about it and make sure it's relevant to that audience member.
I see.
But yeah, usually do sponsorship companies reach out to you? So I want to sponsor you or promote our product service through your newsletter, or do you reach out to relevant companies? So, oh, hey, so we have a newsletter relevant to your product, so why don't you sponsor? So how does it work?
So I've been very lucky in that I haven't needed to reach out to anyone because I'm in my niche, because I focus on a very specific group of email receivers, which are actually email senders at the end of the day. There are a lot of products that are looking to get in front of those eyes. So brands that offer products and services to email senders are generally the ones that approach me. I've done quite a few sponsorships for various brands, from email sort of verification and validation services to email platforms themselves, but I've got the right audience. So I've been in a very fortunate position. There is also an opportunity to approach brands, but you need to ensure that you're showing them what's in it for them, right? So it comes down to basic sales. At the end of the day, here's the value I provide, here's the benefit to you. Would you like to partner with me by sponsoring my newsletter? Now, there are a couple of steps to that process. You need to define first and foremost a couple of good statistics. Am I going to send or pay someone to send an email with my brand in if I'm getting a 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks? Or are you going to show me your statistics and show me a use case about why this carries value for my brand? So building a media kit is a really important facet. Make sure that you've got a media kit that showcases where in your email sponsorship opportunities lie, what your statistics and your history look like from an email statistics perspective, what value and what sort of audience are you speaking to? People want to know, or businesses want to know, what sort of audience you're speaking to so that their product becomes relevant for that audience. So do your research, have some insights. Where in the world, what type of geographic or demographic segments do you have set up? What does your engagement look like? What are people generally showing interest in? If you've got a good media kit, it's already a good starting point to approach brands to go, I'd like you to sponsor my newsletter. Once that starts taking place and you can showcase social proof, so I've sponsored this brand, I'd like to have you sponsor me, that becomes a game changer, because you've got the ability to go, these people have advertised with me, is your name next? Would you like the privilege of making sure that your brand is in front of my audience, because previous brands have had this privilege and they've seen success? So it is a staged journey, but generally it is going to be something that you attract if you send good emails and you grow a good audience. It's not something that you're necessarily going to have to chase if you're sending good emails.
Yeah, and sometimes when you talk to these like sponsors, and they ask you, oh, what's the demographics of your audience and what they do, what's the title, and so on. So in that sense, if the company or brands, if they are just starting out the newsletter or email marketing, would you recommend them like collecting the kind of demographics data, like, oh, hey, what's your title, what do you do, where are you based in, and so on? I know we can guess from IP address, but would you recommend like asking them directly before, or in the beginning?
Definitely in the beginning, not when they're signing up. So what you want to avoid is friction in the sign up process. If I'm asking for, let's say, for example, a 5% open rate, and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate, and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5% open rate and I'm getting no clicks, or I'm getting 5 more than your name and your email address, sometimes even just more than your email address. The drop off on those landing pages, on your sign up forms, increases with every field that you add. So if I want you to fill in a field that says name, email address, family history, your town, your favorite color, you know the drill. I'm not going to fill that in. But this is where your welcome journey becomes super important. So what I've done in the second stage of my welcome journey as an example, and I'll give you my link that you can share with the audience if they'd like to learn more about email. I'd love to have them subscribe. It is a free publication, so I would love to see if I can teach more folks. And I feel like it's a shameless plug, but I'd love to have more people kind of go through that and see what I've done. But in the second stage of that journey, there's a big button there that says, "Hey, stranger, I don't have your name because I don't collect name. I only collect email address when someone's signing up. Hey, stranger, tell me more about yourself so I can tailor your experience to your needs and your goals." And I don't just rely on this. If they haven't filled that in, I keep asking. Not in an aggressive way, tell me your name. I'm going, no name Harry, or is that what you'd like to be called? Please update your name here. Something silly, something that captures attention. But as that journey progresses through the 3 or 4 emails that they receive as they've signed up, and that spans a week and a half to 2 weeks, it's not just one day after day. As they span that journey, I'm trying to learn more about them. I'm monitoring and segmenting based on what they click on. I'm monitoring and segmenting based on obviously the location and that geographic data I can sort of glean. I'm then also asking 1 or 2 questions within polls and surveys to go, are you reading this on web or are you reading this on your mobile device? I'd love to know that, because when I design emails, I want to optimize either for mobile or for web for that individual. So there's a couple of things I'm learning, and as you go and start learning more about what these audience subscribers are into, you can approach sponsors with that information to say, "Here, I've built a picture." But in the beginning, it's tough. Where I would suggest, if you're going to start monetizing before you've got an audience, to put your focus is on how you're attracting people into emails outside of that. How have you targeted them? How are you reaching them? What does that persona look like? Am I speaking to Des, who lives in South Africa, who's interested in email, who's interested in rugby, who's interested in Pokemon? What is it telling me and my sort of sponsor that this person is signed up for? If you've got the right metrics and you say, "I'm targeting rugby fans," or "I'm targeting Pokemon."
So at the end of the day, and just going back to who you're targeting, I think that becomes a really important aspect. And I feel like I've just spoken about that today, coming back to who you're speaking to. But at the end of the day, that segmentation and that learning through that initial process is going to be a really important aspect on getting the right information for your sponsors and making sure that you can sell in email, because you know your audience, you know what appeals to them, you know what they're there for. If you know that in the first place, sponsorship should be easy, because no one's signing up for an email just for the sake of signing up. They're there for a reason. And if you can convey that reason and you can convey who those people are, it makes your advertising journey a lot easier.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. At the same time, so this is just a random question, a random source of question. But let's say, okay, we have a audience, because as your newsletter gets bigger, then you will have broader audience. Or we have, let's say, 1 million subscribers, but they are really broad, located in US, UK, India, Australia, and many countries, continent, and their purpose is kind of really broad. And in that sense, in that case, what would you recommend that newsletter or company to do to acquire sponsorship?
If you have a broad audience, you have a broad audience for a reason. If you look at someone like, and I'm going to think of 1440 is a great example as a newsletter. If you think of the New York Times newsletter, if you think of Morning Brew, if you think of all these notable newsletters with substantial audiences that are across the globe, people are there for something specific, be that news that carries varied interest, be that updates about something varied. It becomes quite difficult to pinpoint exactly how to appeal to everyone, because they're there for something quite generic. That's why very often when it comes to the sort of email journey, it's about niching down. It's about making sure that you've got the right audience, making sure that you're focusing on the right niche, because if you get a generalist audience, your engagement is bound to decline over time. So a very interesting question, and one that is quite difficult to answer just because it varies so much based on the intention of your audience. But if you keep that in mind, at the end of the day, you're going to be doing things well.
Have you ever gotten any sponsorship from other continents, companies like US company, European companies, or Asian company? And so, are there any differences in the requirement among those companies? For example, US companies are requiring ROI, or African companies are looking for awareness in South Africa, for example.
So interestingly, the majority of my sponsorships are US based. So from the US, and second to that is from the UK. I think they just have the biggest propensity to be able to sponsor, because it comes down to things like budgets, it comes down to affordability. It also comes down to me targeting a slightly more global audience than just a local one. So I think that's attracted more notable sponsors. There are also more sponsors in that region, so you're more likely to get sponsorships within that. But if you ring fencing what you're doing to a specific geographic location, it becomes a little bit easier to be more selective with your sponsors. So I've got quite a few South African ones, obviously, because I have a bigger South African audience, but I've never had, I'm thinking of the last 3 years, I've never had an Asian sponsor. I've had Australian sponsors. I've never had a South American sponsor, as an example. So it varies quite a bit, I think, because the language thing is a big one. Most Asian speaking countries, or most the South American countries, are not natively English speaking, whereas Australia, the US, the UK, they're all very English, if I can put it that way, and I'm sending in English. So it does tend to make a difference as well.
I had a question regarding the content, to your content, because you are catching up, you send about like the email strategy, marketing, and so on. How do you catch up with the ideas or content? Do you follow someone and to get, or how do you come up with ideas or content to send?
So my secret, and
Yeah.
it sounds crazy.
I know.
It sounds crazy, but my secret is my inbox. So if you look at if you look at my post on LinkedIn today, I speak about being signed up to more than 300 different emails. That is my
Yeah,
secret.
I saw it. Yes.
I'm learning from the people that are in my inbox as a major source of content. So when I'm sharing information and ideas, I'm getting a broad sense from across the globe of what's happening in email, what's happening in the business sphere, what's happening in AI, what's happening in a couple of different. I'm very hyper organized. So I've got different folders in my inbox for different types of emails. So I've got emails about email. I've got emails about business, about philosophy, about sales, about marketing. And in each of those, I'm consuming quick bits of information. I use AI to summarize. I think Gmail's new Gemini tool that summarizes emails quite nicely does give me a good snippet on things that are longer. But most of the time, I set aside time every day to make sure that I organize my inbox. Even though I've signed up to so many newsletters, I also try and keep an inbox zero approach, which means that I try and keep my inbox clean. So it forces me to have to learn and to have to compartmentalize the information that's in my inbox. And that is my biggest source of learning, first and foremost, the inside of my inbox. The next is the interactions that I'm having and the things that I'm seeing between myself and my customers, and myself and the folks that I engage with on LinkedIn, because it is a channel that I really put a lot of work into as well. So it varies across the board. There's so many spaces for inspiration. There's so many spaces to accumulate things that are going to create good content. At the end of the day, it's finding out what resonates with your audience. And I think learning from others, looking at what they do, learning from the way that they structure things, learning at the content they're sharing keeps me at the forefront of what I need to share with my audience. So I don't follow many news publications. I don't like watching the news or reading it. It's negative most of the time. I am not very active on other social media channels. I've pretty much done away with Twitter, X. It's changed completely. So it's not a source of information because I can't trust it. I can't trust the information that's on Twitter anymore. Things like Facebook, outdated information. It's not in line with my target audience. But then again, I'm keeping an update on what's happening on things like Reddit threads. Reddit is a fantastic place to learn and to engage and to, see what other people are doing and share those ideas, formulate your own concepts and ideas and approaches to things. So I'm very often, looking at that and going, okay, that makes sense. What makes sense for my audience? What's going to add value? Let me incorporate a piece of this and a piece of that. So yeah, quite a few places, but it starts with my inbox.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, interesting approach. And yeah, thank you for sharing the secret and ingredient with us. So yeah, and advice, so regarding advice, do you have any advice to people starting out their own newsletter or email marketing or strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you don't have to do it alone. There's a massive email community out there. These are some of the nicest, most friendly, most helpful people you're going to find. That's one thing I've learned about the email space. The email community and people that are in the email sending space want to see other people succeed. They aren't competing with one another. They're looking to help one another grow, because if people are more engaged with email, it benefits all of us. So I think if you had to be starting out in email, find the right advice, follow the right people, join the right networks, and make sure that the advice that you're getting given is not, email is something that's built over time. It's not a quick fix. It's not a hack. It's not you get so many of these get rich quick overnight type businesses. Email is not one of those, but it is one of the most effective for a business from an ROI perspective, from an engagement perspective, from a learning from your audience perspective, from a newsletter space and learning sort of aspect. That you're not going to find a better place, but you need to be following the right people, looking at the right sort of senders and emulating what they're doing. There's no point in going it on your own. So you have help. That's my first point of advice. Find the right help, find the right inspiration, find the right advice and the right resources. And the next thing is just get sending. You don't have to wait to start a newsletter. Anyone can send emails. Not everyone can send good emails, but it takes time to get to that point. So start, build an audience. Don't wait. Remember, if you aren't building an audience, and this is something that I speak to many marketers and people about, if you aren't building an audience, you're subject to the algorithms that control things like what you see on LinkedIn, what you're seeing on social media channels. You never truly have control, I guess, over the way that you can communicate with them. If the LinkedIn algorithm changes and no one sees my posts, there are 15,000 people that I can't engage with. I don't have their details. If I've transitioned those people into my email list, I have far more of an opportunity to engage with them more personally. And I've also given them control over what they want to receive from me and what they don't. If they don't want to hear from me, they can unsubscribe. Yes, you can unfollow someone on LinkedIn, but if someone that you follow is following me and liking my content, you're still going to see it. If you don't want to see from me, you need to have control over that as well. So if I had to say, start with two things: follow the right people, get the right advice, and start building an audience and get sending immediately. The only way to improve and to get better is to practice. And the best way to be able to practice is to actually just do it.
Thank you. And if the audience want to reach out to you and learn from you, what's the best way to reach out to you? Is that through LinkedIn or email?
Yeah. So there's a couple of places. Email expertafrica.com. Even though it's got Africa in it, it's just because I live in Africa. Doesn't mean that I only work with people or senders in Africa. So email expertafrica.com. You can have a look at what I'm all about from a newsletter community perspective. I am very engaged and active on LinkedIn. So if you go and search for Des Brown and you type in email, I'm probably the first name that's going to come up there from an email and Des perspective. I don't know any other Deses in email. And then the email advice in your inbox newsletter. What I'll do is I'll share the link with you both so that you can pop it up on your channel or share it freely. The goal is to grow a community, not that I can monetize, that happens in other ways, but a community that I can help and assist and support and grow. Because if more people send email, I have more friends. I have more opportunity to be able to build relationships, and it keeps email alive. Email hasn't gone anywhere since the 1970s. It's not going to go anywhere. And so I don't think. But at the end of the day, I want to keep email powerful. I want to keep it strong. I want to keep it one of those channels that's constantly moved with the times. So I'd love to have you join that newsletter. I'd love to have you see what the email community is doing, what we're about, what sort of advice you can learn from. And I'm following the right people and sharing information that they share as well. So you'll definitely be following the right stuff if you sign up to that as well.
Cool. Yeah, we will definitely put your links in the video description. Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So yeah, this is the last question. So since Glasp
Perfect.
is a platform where people share what they are reading, learning as their digital legacy, and we want to ask you this question. So what legacy or impact do you want to leave behind for future generations?
So I guess it speaks to a little bit of my personal philosophy, but leave the world a better place than you found it. That goes beyond just email. It goes beyond just everything that you do. You know, there's so much bad in the world. There's so much weird stuff going on, especially lately. It feels like the world is in quite a bit of turmoil. That can be avoided through kindness. It can be avoided through being good to your fellow man. It can be avoided through just being a good person, doing the right things, looking after the world around you, looking after nature, looking after the world that you've been brought into. And at the end of the day, we're probably not going to remember our journey on this planet. We'll probably only have a very short space of time to leave an impact, and that's eventually going to be forgotten. So leave a legacy with the people that you've left behind. A legacy of good, a legacy of kindness, a legacy of just doing right with the world and leaving it better than you joined it. So that's the way I see it. That's why I try and lead with that kindness and that goodness. You know, it's a good virtue to have, I guess. But at the end of the day, there's not enough of it. So if we can have one more person being good or being kind, then the world's already a better place.
Yeah, really beautiful. And then thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then thank you so much for joining today. We really learned a lot, and we really appreciate your sharing your insights with us and with our audience.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an honor to be on here with you both. I've seen a couple of your episodes already, and it had me excited for today. But keep up the good work that you're doing. Thank you for the patience with my technical issues today as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to when this is ready, sharing it and engaging with you guys more. So please stay in touch. And if we can run this back in the future and do it again, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, definitely.